welcome back to my channel for a book haul. I mean, actually it's sort of off camera now, but I thought I would, you know, make use of my book trolley in a practical way to lug my books through here and pop them all on the top shelf, and it turned out that they don't really all fit. So I think this is a big book haul. I think that's the technical definition. I think you should expect it to be a long one. But I had planned on filming something a little bit more like exciting and in-depth and different this week, but you know, life has just been life, and kind of the capacity I have for creativity is like here, and I am super excited about all these books, so it's just a nice thing to be able to do, sit down and casually chat about them all with you when maybe I'm not in a space to do something a bit more like exciting. That will hopefully be next week. But I have a bunch of books I bought myself, mainly because bookshops did open up here in Scotland, so I popped in and bought a few, as well as the fact that I feel as though I've been sent a lot more from publishers in the past month or so than I have in a while, so I have a few to show you in that regard as well, which means I should probably stop blethering on and show you the books that I have recently acquired. So first things first, as always, I like to show you the books I bought myself with my own money before moving on to the books I was sent from publishers. So starting with the books I bought myself, actually I have 3 books here that were second-hand purchases, so let's grab all of those and start there. The first one I was so excited to find because it was 50p in a charity shop, and it's a book I've been wanting to pick up for the longest time. This could not have been better luck, and it is Miss Phryne Fisher Investigates, book 1 in the Phryne Fisher mystery series by Kerry Greenwood. This is a detective series that is set in the 1920s in Australia and follows a absolutely fabulous female detective. I have watched the entire television show adaptation of this series, but it sadly only had 2 or 3 series and a film, so I have been meaning to pick up the books to get a little bit more Phryne Fisher in my life for a while now. So yeah, like I said, absolutely perfect. Another one that had actually been on my wish list for a while because I'd seen it talked about on BookTube, but I mean a while ago, is The Bridges of Roll Rock Island by Margot Lanigan. So Margot Lanigan is an author who does a lot of sort of dark fantasy fairy tale retellings. I've not read anything by her before, but I've heard a lot of great things, and like I said, this is one that had been on my wish list, so it was absolute luck that I stumbled across it second hand. It's set on a lonely island of cliffs and storms where blunt fishermen and their fierce wives live. Life is hard for the families who must wring a poor life from the stormy seas, but Roll Rock is also a place of magic, the scary, salty, real sort of magic that changes lives forever. So like I mentioned, a lot of darker themes and fairy tale retellings in Margot Lanigan's work, so I'm excited to have this, and it's not too long. Then lastly, for like 49p, I stumbled across a copy of The Third Wife by Lisa Jewell. Lisa Jewell, again, is not an author I've read yet, but is an author I've heard incredible things of. Like, all of these thriller readers I know adore her, particularly my friend Leanne, so it just felt like I couldn't leave it behind. Aside from that, however, I don't really know what I'm getting myself in for. I believe it's about a third marriage, a man who marries a third wife, but she has secrets. Who knows? Just bought it on the basis of the author. Then we move on to the books that I bought myself new, which mainly came from bookstores that I visited with my best friend Jill, and I have no shame, I was so excited to be released back into the wild of bookshops that I kind of didn't exercise a lot of self-control. The first 2 books were ones I picked up in Waterstones on their buy one get one half price tables, so I bought one and got the other for half price, and one is a non-fiction book that sounds absolutely fascinating. It's called A Curious History of Sex by Kate Lister. The title of this one is pretty self-explanatory. It travels all the way back in time to antiquity and Pompeii, from what I understand, through the medieval period and into more modern recent years, looking at the history of sex in all of its multitudes. And I believe that Kate Lister is quite a humorous non-fiction writer, although this is obviously very well researched and I'm sure going to be full of lots of engaging information, so I cannot wait to read it. I myself research sexual violence in antiquity, so I read a lot in that area, and I'm hoping that this will be a sort of complementary book in terms of offering up some information that isn't necessarily always to do with sexual violence, but other aspects of sex and maybe more positive aspects of sex, but I'll let you know once I've read it. I then also picked up in that deal House of Hollow by Crystal Sutherland, which is a dark, paranormal YA mystery thriller, I believe, maybe even horror it could be described. It's one that I've seen a lot on social media recently, partially I think because of how beautiful the front cover is, and I just decided to go for it because I love me dark thriller horror YA. It's my favourite subset of YA for sure. It says, dark dangerous things happen around the Hollow sisters ever since they disappeared as children, only to reappear a month later with no memory of what had happened to them. Eerie occurrences follow in their wake. The next books were actually kind of presents because my friend Sana for Christmas bought me a book voucher for one of my favourite independent bookshops in Edinburgh, which is Golden Hair, and this was the first opportunity I'd had to spend it because bookshops hadn't been open. So I took my book voucher to Golden Hair and picked up these two books, so thank you Sana, these were courtesy of you. And the first one is The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I read my first Silvia Moreno Garcia book last year, which was Mexican Gothic, and adored it, so I had been super intrigued to read something else by her. And although this isn't hardback, I think it actually came out in the US a few years ago, so it's not actually more recent than Mexican Gothic, but you can correct me on that if I'm wrong. However, it's obviously one of her more newer releases in the UK, and I'm super excited for it. I mean, look how beautiful that cover is. I think this is also another one that's set in the mid-20th century, but again, maybe I have just been completely misled. It follows two socialites and their romance as well as their journey as paranormal and supernatural performers, I think. So I'm intrigued, I have to say. Then also from Golden Hair was one that I'd literally never heard of before, but just picked up off the shelf and thought sounded interesting, so decided to take the plunge, and that is The Van Apfel Girls Are Gone by Felicity McLean. So I think this is a bit of a literary mystery thriller. It gave me Virgin Suicides vibes. That's what the blurb gave me, but the book itself could be completely different. It reads that Tika Malloy was 11 and 1/6-year-old during the summer of 1992. That summer, the hottest on record, the Van Apfel sisters, Hannah, the beautiful Cordelia, and Ruth, mysteriously disappeared. Did they run away or were they taken? The mystery of their disappearance has never been solved. So like I said, definitely gives me Virgin Suicides vibes. But even if there is overlap, I do like the idea of a book like that being told through the eyes of a woman. So I'm looking forward to this one. I've just also realised that my earring is in the wrong hole because they're not in the right holes, they don't match. Okay, never mind. I also picked up in Blackwell's when I was with my friend Jill, Kingdoms of Elfin by Sylvia Townsend Warner. This is a collection of sort of classic fantasy short stories. So Sylvia Townsend Warner is an author I've heard of but never read. She also has quite a famous classic fantasy novel from the 20th century. Yes, so this first came out in the 1970s, as I believe did her other work, and I am super intrigued to finally read something by this author. It's a short story collection, so hopefully it'll just give me a bit of an example and an insight into her writing, which will help me know if I want to pick up her novel in the future. But like I said, an absolute classic, so I think it will be nice to read a sort of older, more traditional piece of fantasy from the 20th century. I can't deal with it, I'm moving my ear in. Then I picked up Sword of Fire by Catherine Kerr, another fancy author who I've heard incredible things about for years. I believe Catherine Kerr has been writing for a few decades now, but this is her most recent release. It's just come out and I've always meant to read her, so it just felt like the time. I also think the cover is really, really beautiful. In my commitment to visit every single bookshop in Edinburgh and purchase a book, I ended up going into Portobello Books in Portobello and picking up two non-fiction books, especially for the month of Pride, so I plan on reading these both in June. The first one is We Have Always Been Here by Samra Habib, a queer Muslim memoir, the subtitle of which is pretty self-explanatory. It is the author's memoir of being queer and being Muslim, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. Then we have a collection of essays called The Bible, can you see that there, which is edited by Lauren Nicodemus and Ellen Desmond, and it's actually volume 1. There's a second volume that they did have in Portobello Books as well, so if I enjoy this I definitely want to pick up volume 2, and they are pretty much just essays from lots of different writers about being bisexual, what that means to them and their experiences of being bisexual, both the ups and the downs. And as somebody who identifies as bisexual, this is obviously a topic that is really important to me, and I'm really hoping it will talk more in depth about issues like biphobia that maybe I don't see explored as much in other non-fiction books about LGBTQ+ issues that I have read, and I might be able to like personally identify with this. So yeah, I have high hopes. Then lastly, I have 3 more books that I did order myself a little while ago online, and they just arrived in May. First up is A Study in Honour by Claire O'Dell, which is one I've been meaning to read for the longest time but never actually picked up a physical copy of. And as soon as I tell you what this book is about, you're going to know exactly why I want to read it, because it is a sci-fi futuristic version of Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but where both characters are women. Need I say anymore? Then we have one I found out about last year and sounded so interesting, which is Darkly, Black History in America's Gothic Soul by Layla Taylor. This is part memoir and part cultural critique. Darkly reveals the heart of America's darkness in the spectres left from chattel slavery and the persistence of white supremacy. Locating the Gothic in technologies of terror, the insurgence of melancholy and the guilty conscience of a country that got away with murder, Darkly shows how this trauma has been metabolized into art, music, film and literature. And generally speaking, literary and film criticism is something I want to read more of in literature, so I thought this would be a really good one to pick up. And then lastly we have a middle grade book, which is The Jumbies by Tracy Baptiste. I think you can tell from this cover that this is middle grade horror. I mean, look how spooky and creepy it is. I absolutely love it. It even says at the top here, "They're coming, the Jumbies." And this is about Corinne, who doesn't believe in Jumbies. They are surely just stories that her family have told up to scare her or keep children in their place, until perhaps something happens that might prove her wrong. This is also just one I've seen fantastic reviews for online, and I do love me some middle grade horror. That then brings me to the books I was sent for review. So I will start with 2 books which are actually books that my friends are publishing, so I'm super excited for them as well as the books. The first one is already out, and it's not your traditional book because it's actually a book club journal. So this is the creation and project of my good friend Sana over at Books and Quills, whose channel will be linked down below. And it is, as you can probably guess, a book club journal in a traditional sense, with lots of prompts and sections to fill out about the books that you're currently reading for your book club or just for yourself. You certainly don't have to be in a book club to use this book. It can very much just be used to record your own reading if you prefer a physical book journal. But it's more than a journal for you to write in. It actually has some really wonderful pieces of writing on sort of how to start up your book club, how to pick your books, how to make everyone feel comfortable within your book club, as well as whole lists of book recommendations on different subjects. At the back there, just hit myself with this book. So there's a lot going on in here, and I think this would be particularly wonderful for anyone younger planning on starting their first book club with their friends. But I have already written in this because my friends and I did start a book club recently, and our first read was The Flat Share, so I got an opportunity to use this already. So I've already had an opportunity to use this, and it was so much fun. I'm actually really enjoying the prospect of recording my book club with my friends in a physical journal and having that for years to come, and having the notes on what we read together for years to come. So I'm already really enjoying having this one, and I'm really glad that Mitchell Beasley sent me a copy. Plus, I mean, look how beautiful that is. We then have a proof copy of a book that comes out in July, which is Reputation by Lex Croucher. This book promises to bring Lex's own personal brand of witty, sarky humour to the Regency era and look at the more scandalous side of young life in the Regency era, including the drinking and the excess and maybe all the things that we associate with modern youth. I already love Regency romance and comedy, but I think this one is going to be particularly unique, and I cannot wait to get stuck in. The next 2 books I was actually sent ahead of a event where I interviewed the authors, which was so much fun, and let me tell you, these are some fabulous, fabulous novels. The first one is Madam by Phoebe Wynne, which is set in 1992 in a elite girls boarding school in Scotland, where the most wealthy and lavish of British society send their daughters to be prepared for life out in the real world, or whatever they expect that to be. And we follow a new teacher at this school who has taken on the role of classics department head to teach these girls, and all of the surprises she meets with teaching in such an illustrious setting. And it's dark and gothic and feminist and weaves in Greek mythology and Roman history, and I loved everything about this book. It is basically Catherine House meets Only Ever Yours, and I would highly recommend it. We then have The Cunning Women by Elizabeth Lee, which is historical fiction set in the early 1600s after the Union of the Crown, in a period where women were being persecuted as witches because they didn't necessarily adhere to the norm. However, our protagonist in this book, Sarah, certainly does have witchy tendencies. Her mother is a practicing witch and she has passed on those practices to her daughter. Because of this, they have been ostracised from their community except for whenever they are seen as being potentially helpful in order to offer up like medicines or charms, but that's all done in hush-hush secrecy. And in this book we follow Sarah's forbidden Romeo and Juliet romance with the farmer's son. It is absolutely incredible. Again, another really dark feminist novel that I would highly recommend. We then have two books that were very kindly sent to me by Pan Macmillan. The first one is another YA thriller. I mean, you know at this point how much I love a YA thriller. I love how fast paced they are. I love the semi-predictable nature of them, but I also love the surprises that they throw in there, and I just cannot get enough. This is Five Girls Lied, Five Girls Died, The Cheerleaders by Cara Thomas. So the book's called The Cheerleaders, but obviously we have this very impactful subtitle here on the front. So it's been 5 years since our 5 cheerleaders died, and secrets are starting to come out that might suggest there is still something malicious at play. Then we have a book by an absolute favourite author of mine, which is Blackwater Sister by Zen Cho. Love Zen Cho's writing, absolutely stunning, and cannot wait to check out their most recent novel. Plus, I mean, look how beautiful this cover is. This one is about Jessamine, who is packing for Malaysia. So it's not really a good time to start hearing a bossy voice in her head. Broke, jobless, and just graduated, she's abandoning America to return home. But she last saw Malaysia as a toddler and is completely unprepared for its ghosts, gods, and her family's shenanigans. Jess learns her voice belongs to Amma, her late grandmother. She worshipped the Blackwater Sister, a local deity, and when a business magnate offended her goddess, Amma swore revenge. Now she's decided Jess will help. I mean, does that not sound absolutely phenomenal? Then we have another proof, and this one is from Pushkin Press. It's another literary thriller called Girl 11. The back reads, Vigilante. True crime podcaster El Castillo has long been obsessed with the Countdown Killer. Victims. 20 years ago, he went on a killing spree. Each new victim was a year younger than the last. Vengeance. Now he's back. El must stop the deadly countdown before the killer can claim his next victim. I am really enjoying this rising subgenre of the crime thriller novel where we have true crime podcast hosts getting wrapped up in the murders themselves. Given how popular that podcast genre has become, I'm so here for it, and I'm really intrigued by this one in particular. Then last but not least, we have 3 books which were very kindly sent to me by Verso, who are one of my absolute favourite publishers of non-fiction. They have so many titles I absolutely adore and are just incredible works of like social and political non-fiction. But I also have a fiction book here. But to start with the non-fiction, we have Burn It Down by Brianne Faz, Feminist Manifestos for the Revolution. So this is one that I'd actually had my eye on for a little while because I love the concept. Basically, this compiles together feminist manifestos from various different feminist individuals and groups. So we literally have feminist manifestos dating all the way back to like the 1800s. We have some from the 1970s, we have 1990s, and of course more recent additions to the sort of history of feminist manifesto. And I really like that concept because I think it's going to be really interesting to see the way that feminism is interpreted by all of these different individuals and groups, the priorities that all of these different groups put forward, and the way in which they feel we can make a more feminist society through the steps that they've laid out. I think this is just a really interesting endeavour to have put together as a book, and I cannot wait to have a peruse. In contrast with that massive tome, however, we have something a little bit smaller, which is Tomorrow, Sex Will Be Good Again, Women and Desire in the Age of Consent by Catherine Angel. This is described as a provocative exploration of female desire, consent and sexuality in the age of Me Too. So I think this is going to be something really, really interesting to read. Even having grown up as recently as in the 90s and the early 2000s, I feel that sex education was incredibly lacking in my early education years. And personally, I feel as though I've had a lot of really negative sexual encounters because of that lack of education and that lack of discussion in the wider community. And it's something that I've only really managed to grow and learn more about as I have aged and had access to information online and discussions with other women and other members of communities that I'm part of, and I really love to see more books like this coming out, so I'm looking forward to reading it. Then we have the fiction book that I mentioned, which is Terminal Boredom Stories by Izumi Suzuki. So this is obviously a collection of short stories, specifically 7 punky and pitch black stories. This is actually a piece of translated fiction that was originally written in Japanese and is being published for the first time in English by Verso, and I believe it deals with dark feminist and queer themes, which are all stuff I love in my short stories, so I cannot wait to give them a shot. But those are all the books I've acquired recently. There's a lot. Like, my floor is covered right now. My trolley is empty, which is handy, but my floor is covered. I am, however, super excited about them all, and it's been a lot of fun just being able to go out and peruse the shelves again, although of course safely and sensibly. I hope you have enjoyed this book haul. However, I'd love to hear if you have read any of these books or are interested in reading any of these books. I just want to chat more about them because I'm so excited to have them on my shelves. So please do leave your thoughts down below, and until next time, happy reading. I'll see you all again soon. Bye everyone.